Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the City of Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember Dabala.
Present.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Honzak.
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Jelly.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us on a snowy evening. We appreciate having you all out tonight. Tonight, we're going to get started. There are no changes to the agenda. We will, because we are in the process or the throes of the legislative session in Annapolis, we will have our legislative lobbyists and CCOT join us today for the legislative update. Tonight's agenda also includes adoption of minutes from December the 13th of 2023, as well as voting session, the first reading ordinance amending the city code to remove provisions regarding the Nuclear Free Committee, a resolution approving an employment agreement between the City of Tacoma Park and city manager, a work session. The first is the proposed revisions on sidewalk and traffic calming policies. That'll be a 15-minute presentation followed by a 45-minute Q&A, as well as recommendations for appointments to city boards and committees by our working group on committees. In terms of upcoming agendas, on Wednesday, January the 24th, we will again have a legislative update. We'll also have a presentation from MCPS on public schools attended by Tacoma Park residents. We'll have voting sessions, the second reading ordinance amending the city code to remove provisions regarding the Nuclear Free Committee, as well as a consent agenda, resolutions providing for appointments to committees, as well as a work session, the video camera trailer memorandum of understanding with the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority. Just as a reminder for everyone, on Thursday, January the 25th, the the County Council public hearing on the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment will be at 7 p.m. at the Tacoma Park Middle School. Advanced sign-up is required by January the 24th at 5 p.m. is required to testify. On Friday, January the 26th, the City Council will have an administrative session of a council retreat. On Saturday, January the 27th, the Benefit Corporation for Africa Forum will be taking place in the City Auditorium from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then on Wednesday, it's going to be a busy week next week. On Wednesday, January the 31st, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We'll have a legislative update as well as a voting session, approval of video camera trailer memorandum of understanding, as well as work sessions. There's a tentative work session, a review of our proposed facilities regulations, as well as a quarterly financial report. And that takes us through the end of January. And so with that, I just want to check to see if Anne is on the line.
I'm here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for joining us this evening. Just for members of council, one of the things that I'm hoping we'll do today is not only hear from Anne on the what's happening in the legislation that's happening to date, but also to just make sure that everyone is aware of the process going forward in terms of as the bills come in feverishly, the process that we'll have in place to make sure that we're able to review them in a timely way. So with that, I'll turn things over to Anne to provide us with any updates in terms of what's happening in session.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Happy to kick things off this week with what's going on in Annapolis. We've been in session now for a week. The overriding theme that we are hearing about is the budget picture for the state, which is not very pleasant. Over $750 million projected deficit for the coming year, and that will only grow. That is both a reflection of really kind of us getting back to normal, if you will, back to the trends, the budget trends that existed before the pandemic and the very significant amount of federal aid that came to the state. And it's also reflected, especially in the next few years, of the very significant investment the state has made in our public education system. And I think the struggle for the next few years is going to be how to finance that to an adequate degree. So we're going to be hearing a lot about the budget. Speaking of the budget, it came out today. Folks who are interested in looking through it, which is what I will do after I get off this call, the budget books are available on the website for the Department of Budget and Management. And there's a highlight section and then the details in a couple of other volumes. And so it takes a while to really go through it with a fine-tooth comb and figure out what's really there or not. So that's kind of the overall picture for, again, the overall theme that's I think going to be dominating a lot of the discussions. But there will be very good bills, and we've talked about the kinds of things that we're looking to support as a city, the kinds of things that our District 20 team is going to be bringing forth. A lot of really good bills that will help the citizens of the city and the state. We're also talking with the District 20 team as well about some capital dollars for the community center. So we're doing a lot. The bills are just starting to trickle in. We will have almost all the bills by the end of the first full week of February. We have deadlines on the 5th and 8th of February for Senate bills and House bills to be introduced. So things are starting to roll in. Some of the really big ones we're anticipating haven't been introduced yet, but they will be. And we'll work out this process and be able to start reporting on specific bills very soon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ann. And I want to give a special thanks to Councilmember Small and Councilmember DeBala that have volunteered to help us with aspects of triage in terms of the bills that will come through. Just by way of process, I want to make sure that all of my colleagues know that we will be receiving, everyone on council will be receiving the full list of the bills that are coming through. I want to encourage folks to please take a look. And if there are things that may be of interest, please follow up with Councilmember DeBala or Councilmember Small in terms of those items and where they fit. Also feel empowered that if there are items that are listed that you are paying attention to and that that we've all agreed are things that we want to support as a city with potential testimony or written testimony or going out to Annapolis, definitely let us know so that we can work really hard to make sure that we're coordinating on this effort. But again, I do want to thank Councilmember DeBala and Councilmember Small for volunteering to help with triage. And so, and just as just your normal process, we receive the bill list. Everyone should have one that's already in your inbox. And again, you know, the pace is typically pretty quick, and that's why I'm really grateful for Councilmember DeBala and Councilmember Small. But definitely take a look, and as the session progresses, if there are things that come up that are of interest to you, feel free to email, copy myself, but email Councilmember Small, Councilmember DeBala, and Ann so that we can keep track of them. Also, just want to remind everyone that, you know, we had lots of conversations around our legislative priorities and our council priorities. And so definitely Ann has those, and we'll be looking for bills that fit those core areas. And I just want to remind everyone on council to be mindful of those legislative priorities as you're reviewing the bill list as well. Are there any questions either by based on the list that folks have received to date, or the process, or just kind of what to expect with this session. And Anne summarized it really accurately. I was at a breakfast on Monday, and Governor Moore was there, and he drilled home education. So we know that that's going to be a really big issue, but definitely want to hear from members of council that may have any questions regarding the process or the list to date. Councilmember Siemens. That was a false light. All right. Are there any questions or thoughts? All right. Awesome. Well, not seeing any lights, and this is going to be a quick one, but it's not going to be quick long. Oh, Councilmember DeBala.
It strikes me that it might be a good idea to have somebody from the city manager's office participating in this as well, especially since there's only 2 council members. I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll make sure to inform the acting city manager, and thank you, acting deputy city manager, Mr. Bodek, for being voluntold that we will have some folks on city staff to just kind of help also with the triage and making sure we're pointing things out. Thank you very much, Councilmember DeBala, for reminding me of that. Councilmember Small?
Yes, I did want to say, and officially on the record, and to anybody who's listening, that I will testify on every single bill that is related to the State Highway Administration.
Noted.
All right. Okay, so are there any other comments or questions? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Anne. We really appreciate all of the work that you're doing for us in Annapolis.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Have a good one. Okay, now we're going to move on to public comments. Do we have any public comments this evening? Just as a reminder for everyone, we have comments on any voting items. Tonight's voting items are a first reading ordinance amending the city code to remove provisions regarding the Nuclear Free Committee, as well as a resolution approving an employment agreement between the city of Tacoma Park and a city manager. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to general public comments. No worries. Let me turn your light on.
Tom Gagliardo, Ward 1, 107 Hodges Lane. I know it's a foregone conclusion, but if people are willing to serve on a committee and serve a city function, that should take precedence over any administrative efficiency that one might imagine. And I think, quite frankly, you're making a mistake to abolish the Nuclear Free Committee. I understand it's a long debate. I understand you've already had that debate. You've already made your decision. But I think the record should reflect that.
Thank you very much, Tom. Do we have any other public comments on voting items? Okay. Do we have any general public comments this evening? Come on down.
You first.
Good evening, Sue Miller, Ward 3. A week has gone by since my comment here, and we still have no explanation from planning for the serious breach of process, ethics, and trust that has occurred. They promised the public, the city, and the planning board that there would be an equity analysis from the Office of Legislative Oversight. That report does not exist. The fact that no analysis was legally required is irrelevant. The point is that we were misdirected at key moments in this process over a period of months. So again, we were duped. Why? And who takes responsibility? After more than a week, it's apparent that we cannot rely on planning staff to give us a straight answer on what happened, whether it was a massive screw-up or intentional misdirection. So far, they haven't even acknowledged their own recorded statements. It is frankly not really credible that this was an error made repeatedly on video and then in writing over the course of months with multiple people signing off on it. But whether or not it was an intentional misdirection, It completely invalidates the votes by both the City Council and the Planning Board in the eyes of the public. You approved this draft with assurance that an equity analysis would come from OLO, when it will not. We cannot afford to just ignore this when the equity effects of this plan, the risk of rising rents and displacement are still threatening as far as the public is concerned. The outreach by planning was poor. The concerns of the community were not effectively communicated to the board, and the board rolled right over the concerns of the city. And with this documented misinformation or disinformation, the city and the public deserves an explanation. We cannot just roll forward with this plan under these circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Yeah.
Ms. Machui, I will go to the Zoom after the folks in the room have had their opportunity to speak. I'll let you know when we're ready for you.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
We're ready?
Ready.
Okay. Troy Jacobs, Ward 5 on Flower Avenue, which I like to think of as the gateway to Tacoma Park rather than the freeway. And that alludes to what I'm going to address with you all tonight, is that I am very encouraged by the revised policy for requests for traffic calming and sidewalks, particularly the evaluation and consultation steps and the early staff input, as well as being a more data-driven process. One of the things that I would point out is in terms of the initiation from the community, while it's implied, it could be made more explicit what the community is in terms of community organizations, so that it's not just neighborhood associations and residents, but also schools and parent teacher associations, things like that. Particularly where I live, that is Rolling Terrace and Sims, which is often forgotten in discussions in Tacoma Park. And so that speaks to the need to continue to advocate for cross-jurisdictional concerns. Regardless of what happens with the MMPA, we have already seen growth and anticipate further growth in the areas bounding Tacoma Park. So there's going to be increased traffic where we live, especially along the Purple Line. And so what we need to strive for is a more walkable, safe, drivable community. And we welcome the changes that are in the policy that you are addressing tonight, as well as what's happening with the MMPA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
I'm Tom Gagliardo, Ward 1. I'm going to pose this as a question. I see that today introduced in the Montgomery County Council was a zoning text amendment by former Mayor Kate Stewart. It appears to have been co-sponsored by virtually every other member of the council, so I think its fate is clear. On the surface, it looks like a good idea. I haven't studied it fully, so that's why I'm going to pose this as a question rather than as a position. Is the, and I forgot what name it's been given, but is the new zoning category for religious and educational facilities the more appropriate zoning category for the former site of the Adventist Hospital and the current site of Washington Adventist University? You've heard us criticize the density that the current master plan would call for and a zoning change. And now that there's this new proposal, the question is that more appropriate? I really think it deserves careful consideration and further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments?
Good evening. I'm Denise Jones from Ward 5 on Maple Avenue in Tacoma Park. I didn't really have anything prepared, but I did want to speak to you at least one more time before the planning board meeting, the council meeting, excuse me. And I want to start with the fact that this week I've heard a few reviews about the movie Origin, a film retelling by Ava DuVernay of the critical book Caste, written by Pulitzer Prize author Isabel Wilkerson. It's also the week of celebration in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I've been thinking a lot about the intent of the Minor Master Plan. Many of Dr. King's quotes, I'm not going to repeat any of those tonight, but I've been thinking about the intent of the Minor Master Plan, this displacement, this gentrification displacement of most residents who live in the more affordable rent-stabilized units in this town. The process by the city and the planning board has been wrought with an overarching feel of get out of the way. Get out of the way, know your place. Know your place and get out of the way of our desire to create the community that we want. And it doesn't include you necessarily. So be quiet and get out of the way. When people who live here on the street and in the Flower District and others who don't spoke up and said, hey, wait a minute, you can't just do that indiscriminately, you started to get yourself together to listen as it should have happened in the first place. But it's more or less felt like it's been a check the box process on your part, my city council, and also on the part of the county planning board. And I just cannot help but think about this movie, Caste. And I can't help but think about the things that Dr. King was fighting for, the equity issues he was fighting for, and helped bring other people along. And it's still a fight that we have to have today. I am disappointed. I certainly hoped that we would be in a better place today, especially in a city that claims to be progressive. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments this evening? Okay. All right. Looks like Mary. Okay.
I thought you were moving on. I was trying to remember.
Yep, no worries. Ms. Machui, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear
Wonderful.
me?
Yes, we can, and we can see you too. It is your time to speak today.
I want to thank Ms. Jones. I think she's the most intelligent person in the room there. And I applaud her. She's telling the truth. I've seen gentrification. It is so, well, I feel like vomiting whenever I hear you all brag about how inclusive Tacoma Park is. You're not inclusive. You treat my son like dirt. You treat like worse than dirt. The only person in the whole, all you council and the mayor that ever tried to help my son was Mr. Siemens, and then he dropped the ball. You always drop the ball with us. My son's a slave. He is. He's a slave. He has no freedom. And the housing office never returns my call, even when I've been polite. I've been polite for years. My son was born here in Tacoma Park. I've been polite for years. And I hate yelling and I hate complaining, but being polite doesn't help. You all don't listen when I've been polite. What am I supposed to do? I'm thinking of performing civil disobedience until you learn to tell this Ann person what we need. The Bell Disability Administration and all the state people who treat us like dirt. Why don't you stick up for us? We need help more than anybody. People who have neurodiverse, low-income neurodiverse people, especially those who are Black, need help. We need help now. We needed help yesterday. And I'm sick of yelling and I'm sick of complaining, but do something. It's an emergency. It's an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Machui. Okay, do we have any other virtual comments?
Is it Ellen Ensel next? Or-
Great. Good evening. You have the floor.
Grow up.
Oh, I don't think you heard me. Ellen, can you hear us okay? Awesome. You have the floor.
Go to hell, Ann.
I believe
You may
though
be
that
muted.
Casey is
Okay, I
before
think
me.
you're muted. Hold on one second. Let's just triple check with the tech. Okay, you can go now.
She's still muted.
Yep.
I believe that Casey is before me.
Oh, no worries. We figured out how we can hear you now, so
Oh.
we're going to have you go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. My name is Ellen Ensel. I live on Roanoke Avenue in Ward 5. And Kara Hanzak is my council member. We've been encouraged to make some comments regarding the traffic calming and the traffic calming program, or what you're going to be, your policy, what you're going to be looking at. So briefly, I wanted to mention a couple of things. I'm close to Flower Avenue, and Flower Avenue people need to be a little bit more careful on Flower Avenue. I would recommend or think about a stop sign at Flower and Hudson. There is a ride-on bus stop there. There's a University of Maryland shuttle bus stop there. There's no stop sign, and it's hard for people to to cross the street safely when you try to get off the bus, and I think that's an issue. Traveling north on Flower, at the intersection of Flower and Piney Branch, I guess Tacoma Park owns that one corner of the intersection. There is a short left turn lane for cars to turn onto Piney Branch, but there's no left turn signal. There's a left turn signal in every other direction. I've never understood that. I'm hoping that either Tacoma Park may have some way to comment about that. I know that whole area may have multiple jurisdictions. I'd like to echo what Troy Jacobs says about increased traffic and really being aware of the kinds of things that we're going to be needing. I would also like to echo what Denise Jones says, because there's something about the question comes up of like who belongs in Tacoma Park. And I think that's an issue that we certainly want to be inclusive about, but we also want to understand what's happening to people who don't feel included. And I can end by saying, as I was waiting for the council meeting to start, we were shown a number of images of Tacoma Park. It's a nice compilation of photos. I'd like to let the person know who puts the photos together that my ward is not represented. I don't see anything that shows the diversity of Ward 5 up in the northern section of Tacoma Park. Even a couple of photos of Sligo Creek could be anywhere. So let's think about what's the image of Tacoma Park. What are we trying to do as a city? And I hope that that's something the council can take into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And next up, we have Casey Kostick.
Good evening. My name is Casey Kostick. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and I wanted to comment this evening on the work session related to updates to the traffic calming and sidewalk request policies. First of all, I'm really excited to see that this is on the council agenda tonight. It's something I care deeply about, as many of you know, and has been something that's been discussed on the council and with staff and the community for a long time. So I think it's really important to see this moving forward. I want to thank the city staff for putting together this policy recommendation and presenting it with a really easy to follow chart. I thought that was a really useful way of presenting it. And I also want to thank the council for considering the policy changes. I urge you to have a really thorough discussion this evening and then to move forward swiftly on finalizing the policy changes. As I said, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I hope we can move forward quickly with it. As you know, the current policies do not work well for a variety of reasons, including the fact that they are inequitable in the impact they have on single-family versus multifamily properties. Overall, the proposed changes in front of you help to resolve these issues. They allow for multiple avenues for requesting traffic calming or a new sidewalk, including from individual residents, council members, and city staff. They allow for a good amount of public input and involvement, and they're also clear and straightforward and present a transparent and streamlined process. Most importantly, they are more equitable and they allow for projects to be identified and move forward more easily in locations where there are multifamily buildings. They also allow for a more balanced approach to prioritizing the needs of the community at large, rather than only the preferences of those who are living immediately adjacent to a location. These are important and overdue changes that our community would be served very well by, and I thank you for having the discussion tonight and hope that you'll move forward with the changes soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other virtual comments this evening?
We have Paul Hubner.
Great. All right, Paul.
Good evening. How you doing, Mayor?
Good evening. I'm used to
I'm
seeing you, Paul. Okay, I can see you now.
I'm Paul Hubner. I live in Ward 3. Tonight, we look forward to meeting our new city manager. We have many challenges ahead, and the absolute best place for guidance are the council's own priorities. With these as the guiding light, we hope that he or she will hit the ground running. In fact, this hiring alone constitutes completion of one of those priorities. Another priority that has also been addressed is the ongoing budget and balancing act. So already this council is moving forward on their goals. Thank you. During discussions about this year's budget forecast, we were all introduced to some of these challenges. Most importantly, aligning our goals and expenditures with our projected income. We are all hopeful that the council priorities and our values will lead our decisions. Got lost for a second. We already paid some tens of thousands of dollars for budget projections and recommendations. I thought received by the council, but they will need some work to align with recent projections. All too often, when council members ask for costs, time, or what would be needed, the acting city manager often replied that he would need to consult with staff. These were efforts by council members to assess the metrics of a cost-benefit analysis, something has been requested over many years. Having metrics like time on task, alternative costs are an essential means to reach consensus. We must have a means to assess effectiveness, and time on task is a no-brainer. Every job most all of us have had required some measurement of the time allocated to each task, like cost codes or billable hours. When I worked in 2 different unions, either we or the foreman submitted timesheets. As a line worker, as a superintendent, and as a project, I submitted timesheets and charged my time to a particular job or task. Even lawyers keep billable hours to account for their time and assure correct payment and proper billing. It is essential for our new city manager to begin the practice of keeping metrics. This will allow both the council and the city manager to better understand what our managers and staff spend their time doing and to evaluate the cost-benefit analysis. Welcome to the many challenges ahead, Mr. or Miss, and all the best in your new endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hubner. Do we have any other virtual comments? Great, thank you so much. And thank you to all of the commenters this evening. We're going to move on to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Councilmember Small?
I'll defer to Councilmember Gibson.
Councilmember Gibson?
Thank you. Just real briefly, I want to respond or reflect on the two commenters tonight with regard to the equity assessment or equity report that was promised us. And I entirely agree that it is egregious. We were misled. And my hope is that the county council will not be misled, and perhaps they can delay until they do get an equity analysis. I think it's one of three really important analyses that are needed. We hope to get, I think it's supposed to be tomorrow, a climate assessment. We need that. We also need a traffic assessment. All three of those are needed to make a good decision. And I believe that when we, the council, had to make our decision, without those documents, without those assessments, we were not informed enough to do that. On a more positive note, I want to reflect back on Monday's service efforts that many people made, I think, on the council and in the community on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I was fortunate to join a couple dozen folks with Friends of Sligo Creek and to sweep the creek and pull weeds and pick up trash and in some cases plant new seeds. We have a great city with a magnificent array of civic organizations. I think it is almost incomparable. I'm very glad that I could be a part of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to begin the weekend or the session Positive Dominoes by discussing a couple of things, but I think it's important for us to understand that when you read the code that the city of Takoma Park uses, and you look at the charter, and you can see very reasonably that there are lots of places where things meander into kind of corners of negative inertia. And then you can maybe say that there are maybe some political reasons why some things meander into negative inertia as well. But the dominant paradigm being that people want to determine who is the most appalled seems like a bad idea to me as we move forward into a different set of circumstances. For a couple of reasons. Number one, it doesn't acknowledge any number of things, not the least of which being the plaintive amount of melanin of a couple of people on the council. Number two, it doesn't necessarily acknowledge the substantive efforts that people have made on behalf of any number of people specifically. And number three, it's really difficult to move forward on things that matter over time when we get stuck on things that are not in the proper courts. And I don't mean to be overly difficult about that, but just from the perspective of lanes and where things are, I know that it is important to people to be heard. And one of the things that I thought I was doing in getting elected was doing that. But there are no real mechanisms whereby any of us can make anybody over there or here or anybody really do anything because of the way things are written. And so when you ask people about things or you want to inquire about long-term policy decisions or why things don't happen in this way or that way, there are any number of ways in which people have excuses as to why things didn't occur. Whether that be in the neighborhoods who should have been advocating for different things or whatever else. But the point is that if we don't can stop trying to be mean to each other and or proving to each other that our fury is the most righteous. Then we'll never have any value in the rhetoric that we use, because it's never going to be true that any decision that is made on a political decision in the city of Tacoma Park, as long as I am on here, will not be well reasoned or well considered. You may not agree with it, but again, there's no person who feels more alienated or less included than anybody here who comes in here and feels like they aren't heard. Because everybody is the same. Everybody is alienated from the aspects of government that would make them feel empowered as humans, as discrete members of a community, or as people who live in a place. And until we decide that we're going to fix those things, we're going to scoff at each other. And that's just not good for anybody. And if we get to scoffing and playing the dozens, I'm good at that. I serve sucker MCs by nature because I'm a b-boy. And so I'd like to not do that anymore. I'd like to be able to ask people why there are long-term policies that seem to have been codified that we don't follow, or why it's possible for people to give us the runaround, and what channels are effective to do that rather than excoriating people every week about these things. Because the mechanisms whereby anybody would do these things aren't helped by being flagellated by people when they don't have to do what we say either.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, just two quick announcements. This Saturday at 11 a.m. on Hopewell Avenue, there'll be a meeting with, an informal meeting with the developer for the proposed senior housing. If anyone in the neighborhood is interested, starting at 1002 Hopewell and then moving to the outdoors, assuming there's not 6 inches of snow on the ground. This is not the official pre-submission application hearing. This is just an informal with the neighbors, but it is an opportunity to find out what's going on with this proposal at its current stage. Second thing, next Tuesday the 23rd, a week from Tuesday, I guess, is a county hearing on the low-income property tax proposal. And my question is whether someone on staff might be drafting comments or whether someone on council, perhaps such as myself, would be drafting comments for the mayor to sign. On the assumption that since we were one of the many folks who asked for this bill, we should probably support it.
Right. Yep. So it would be helpful, Councilmember DeBala, if you could send that bill language
Okay.
and the link, particularly for sign up for testimony, so that we can go ahead and get registered to testify for that one.
Will do. Thank you.
No worries. There's a lot of testimonies that are having to get put together over the next week or so, so we can add that one to the list. Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. Just a brief comment. I just want to thank everybody that came out tonight to speak, and it was really nice to have three different members of Ward 5 on this icy cold night. So thank you for stepping forward. Ms. Jones, I hear you. I know we may not always agree on some of these issues, but I hope you'll continue to come out and share your thoughts with me, and we can continue to dialogue. I do seek to sit and listen and hear and not just check boxes. So I do hear you. And Mr. Jacobs and Ms. Enzel, I want to thank you for giving us some in-depth comments and feedback also on your thoughts on the traffic policies that we're going to be talking about today. These are really important to me. And a lot of people gave feedback over the last two months of meetings that we've had about these issues. So I appreciate you taking the time to share those thoughts. Thanks.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who came out to make public comment tonight and those that joined us for the at-home version of city council meetings. Today I had a really lovely conversation with Councilmember Siemens and Councilmember Gibson, talking about some of the finance and budget stuff that we're going to, propose to other council members to look over to see how you feel about it, because though we are this subcommittee that's going to make the recommendations, we still need to make sure that it's what everybody agrees to. We had great discussion, some disagreement, talked about kombucha. It was very Tacoma Park. I'm excited about tonight's agenda item. The traffic calming and sidewalks are really important to me. And then I just want to highlight that tomorrow at 7 o'clock, I think that's right, here in the community center is the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project. And so I really encourage people, like I said last week, even if this isn't necessarily your project of choice, I think this is kind of a sign of things that we need in Tacoma Park, some bigger projects that really make a big impact on bicycle and pedestrian safety. And so if you can make it and come out and share your thoughts, I'd appreciate that. Also, recently reached out to County Council Member Kate Stewart about some of the intersections where we have streets, and my example was Tacoma Avenue, where half of it's in Tacoma Park, half of it is in the purview of Montgomery County, and I think Councilmember Honzak, maybe this is something that I'll be reaching out to you to as well, and I included the mayor on it, so that we can make sure that we're having a little more seamlessness. We are fortunate to be in Tacoma Park, and for instance, Tacoma Avenue, sidewalks on the Tacoma Park side, nothing on Montgomery County's side, and it does impact our residents that those sidewalks just abruptly end. And so, and I do have people from the Montgomery County side saying like, hey, how do we get that good thing that's going on in Tacoma Park? And I think that it would be good for our residents and for Montgomery County residents just outside of us that we include them in our thoughts. And so looking forward to working with fellow council members and with Councilmember Kate Stewart, who happens to sit on that transportation committee. So it's just perfect to move some of these items forward. So again, happy in-person New Year for me. It's good to see you guys, your faces in person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. And I will say, I'm looking at our Director of Public Works, we managed to get sidewalk coordination with Prince George's County. Just saying.
How hard can it be?
Just saying. We were able to work with Prince George's County and Ward 6 to get continuous sidewalks. I'm just saying. So definitely appreciate your advocacy in that vein. So for me, I have the opportunity on Monday to go to the Alpha Phi Alpha MLK brunch. As I mentioned previously, it was attended by Governor Moore, and it's just a really great opportunity to not only support a great organization, great scholarship opportunity, but also to hear from the governor around the priorities that he is upholding during this legislative session. So appreciative of that. And I want to give a special thanks to all of the residents in the community that went out on the day of service. I know it was cold and it was icy. And so for so many folks to go out and really show your commitment to our community, thank you all so much for your service. I want to thank all of the folks that came out tonight to talk about the minor master plan, the equity analysis. I did have an opportunity to speak with the county executive, and so my hope is that we will. He's committed to making sure something happens where we can get some reports. So my hope is that will manifest during the process of the county council review. I've been told we should be able to start to see some things coming out from the county exec's office within a few weeks. The other big thing I want to give a special thanks to, a lot of times I don't think people fully realize all of the amount of work that our staff do day in, day out to really not only serve our community, but to put us in a position, in a positive light, to be able to receive and coordinate with others. So I do want to give a special thank you to our HCD staff, Alex, Roz, our public works staff, Daryl, for all of the work that you all have been doing in coordination with SHA. Everyone knows SHA is a tough nut to crack. But your due diligence has really helped us with getting a number of things accomplished most recently, including a lot of the work that's happening along Carroll Avenue and stop signs and new lights and all of those things. Coordination takes time, but I'm appreciative of everyone's professionalism and persistence in terms of ensuring that things get done. I also want to just again give a special kudos to Devin McNally in our housing department. I don't know what happened last week, but it seemed like every major building had a problem. From Heath and Allen to Hampshire Towers, to Essex House, like every building had a major outage last week. And so Devin was working around the clock to really make sure that the residents had safe places to be, hot water, gas, heat, electricity. He was working nonstop, so I really want to thank him. And lastly, I want to give an extreme kudos to our acting deputy city manager, Mr. Eubanks. He has been just carrying such a lion's share of work for our city, and I owe him my first year because he has been working so diligently over the last year to really just keep things moving. And so I just want to take this moment to just highlight and put some faces and names to the people that are moving a lot of mountains on your behalf, because it's not easy, and they're committed to making sure that the city runs effectively and that we receive what we need and what you all receive what you need. So I just want to spend a couple minutes to just thank folks for that. And then lastly, over the weekend, I will be attending the Mayor's Innovation Project, which is a project that is a conference that is in the DC area this year. Just brings mayors together from all over the country to learn best practices and learn about things that we can do as mayors to address some of the common challenges that we face. So if you're looking for me over the course of the weekend, I will be there in DC. And so with that, just want to make sure there's nothing else that I have missed. With that, I'm going to turn things over to, is Mr. Eubanks available?
He is under the weather.
He is very under the weather.
He said
Poor thing.
he would be online, but he asked me to do the comments tonight. So.
Okay. Well, and he's even calling in when he is very ill. So
Yes.
we are extremely appreciative. So I'm going to turn things over to our acting deputy city manager, Mr. Boda.
All right. Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for the appreciation to staff. And I want to echo that back to the council and the tireless work that you all do for very little compensation, I might add, and second jobs, and your work for the community. And it's very much appreciated by staff. So thank you very much. A few announcements. You guys touched on a number of them already. This Friday, January 19th, from 7:30 to 9 p.m. at the Community Center, Tacoma Park Arts is hosting iMusical Improv, an event featuring an improvised musical from the Washington Improv Theater. Tickets are free. A reminder, Thursday, January 25th, from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Tacoma Park Middle School, the Montgomery County Council is holding a public hearing for the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. Residents who wish to testify either in person or on Zoom sign up by January 24th at 5 p.m. The link to sign up will be in the city manager's comments posted tomorrow. 2 new restaurants have opened in the old Tacoma Main Street district. Muay Thieu, a locally owned Vietnamese food truck, is expanding into their first brick-and-mortar location at 7006 Carroll Ave, and Cielo Rojo has officially opened their expanded space at 7211 Carroll Ave. Both businesses received Tacoma Park Business Investment Grants. Staff has launched the Multifamily Building Improvement Grant for 2024. A webinar will be held January 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Awards will be up to 70% of the project cost with a maximum award of up to $250,000. Tacoma Park Police are collecting new gently used bath towels, beach towels, bathroom rugs, hand towels, washcloths, blankets, beds, toys, and unopened food to help the Montgomery County Animal Shelters. Those will be collecting through Friday, February 2nd. Please bring your donations to the Tacoma Park Police Department lobby here at 7500 Maple Ave, and we will get them to the animal shelters. Note, for the safety of the animals, no fitted sheets, items with zippers, or snaps. The Community Police Academy is now accepting applications for its 12-week-long program geared toward helping community members better understand the work of the police department. Participation is free to residents but limited to 25 participants. The application is due on Friday, February 16th. More information can be found in the city manager comments posted tomorrow. Registration for summer camp opens noon online in person on each of the following dates: February 14th for scholarship recipients, February 21st for Tacoma Park residents, February 28th for non-residents. The Winter Basketball League starts Saturday, January 20th. There are 9 different divisions, kindergarten through 8th grade. Games will be played on Saturdays at Highland View Elementary School, Piney Branch Elementary School, Rolling Terrace Elementary School, and Tacoma Park Middle School. We have over 600 participants signed up for winter basketball. And futsal is full on now with 120 participants. The league will start Sunday, January 21st, and will be played at the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move on to adoption of minutes. So we have minutes from December the 13th of 2023. Would someone like to move the adoption of the minutes? So moved. Thank you, Councilmember Small. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Gibson. All those in favor of adopting the minutes from December 13th of 2023, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any opposed? Any abstain? All right, wonderful. Now we're going to move on to our voting session. Tonight, we have a first reading ordinance amending the city code to remove provisions regarding the nuclear-free committee. Just as a reminder for colleagues, that resolution and the resolution was just slightly tweaked based on feedback that was provided during our work session last week. The one modification was to add the whereas clause that Councilmember Gibson requested. The other was to add some just clarifying language regarding the section of the code that is being adjusted. I know that Councilmember Small had asked for notice to strike Article 8, but what the city attorney found was that there were a number of other just smaller places throughout that whole section of the code that got struck, so it was just cleaner to say that whole section of the code had been modified.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So would someone like to move the first reading ordinance amending the city code to remove provisions regarding the nuclear-free committee?
I would move.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do we need to do a roll call, given this is an ordinance?
The second reading, typically do the roll call.
Okay, excellent. All those in favor of approving the first reading ordinance amending the city code to remove provisions regarding the nuclear-free committee, please say aye. Aye. Do we have any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. So this will come back to us next week as a second reading ordinance. All right, so now we have a resolution approving an employment agreement between the city of Tacoma Park and the city manager. Would someone like to move the resolution approving an employment agreement between the city of Tacoma Park and the city manager?
So moved.
I'm gonna move it first. Okay, Councilmember Fulcher moves. Councilmember Siemens, thank you very much. Second?
Mayor, discussion, please.
Yes. Councilmember, now we're open. Thank you.
all right,
Sorry,
you're right.
I'm giving so many names so fast. All right, Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to say that structurally, this is a fine contract as the result of a fine process by and large. I would also say that it is still a fact that everyone that we interviewed to bring this process home said the best thing to do is to grow your own city manager. And so I hope that we can continue along the fabulous line that we may have potentially created for ourselves with regard to actings and deputies and whoever else trying to stay in the mix. Additionally, I would also say that as we move forward into an opportunity to ideally in some minds put some stability to the senior administrative office in the city and provide some direction to professional staff. I hope that we can move forward with the urgency by which we are asked to look at these problems. And the excitement by which people hope for when they submit themselves to these public floggings to get elected.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Do we have any other comments or points of discussion? Councilmember DeBala?
I wanted to thank the rest of the committee, subgroup, for all your hard work over the 6 months that it took to get started, get organized, and do all the pieces, including the public outreach. So thank you.
Great. Well, I want to also echo Councilmember DeBala's appreciation for our subgroup, our working group that consisted of Councilmember DeBala, Councilmember Honzak, and Councilmember Small. I really appreciate all of your hard work in moving things forward. Also, just want to thank our firm that we worked with, GovHR, for all of their hard work, and Mike there. And I just want to announce that our city manager, I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Robert DeSpirito. We are super, super, super excited to have him join the city of Tacoma Park. He has many years of experience in Rockville and numerous other cities across the country. And so we are really excited to have him join the team. I also want to, again, just reinforce my appreciation for Mr. Eubanks, for all of the hard work that he has been doing over the many months. And I echo Councilmember Small's point of making sure that we're creating the right environment to grow from within. And so super, super, super excited about what the future in the city of Tacoma Park holds for Mr. Eubanks. And thank you so much to Mr. Bodek for all the work that you've been doing. But I'm also excited about what Robert can bring to the table and kind of helping us with advancing the city and really tackling some of the hard administrative challenges that we're facing right now. So with that, they're seeing that there are no more comments on the resolution. We're going to move to a vote. All those in favor of a resolution approving, we need to do a roll call for this or no? Okay, there's a resolution. Eventually I'm going to get this right. All those in favor of approving an employment agreement between the city of Tacoma Park and Robert DeSpirito as city manager, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? All right. He will.
Just one reading? Do we have to do this again next week?
Nope, one reading. And just as a by the by, Mr. DeSpirito will be starting on Monday. All right, so we're excited about that. Okay, so now we're going to move on into our work session. Councilmember Gibson.
I just wanted, we will be posting this information. You want to clarify that?
Yes, sure. Yes, very much so. So the resolution for today, as well as the contract that is unsigned, will be posted? Just checking to see whether or not it's already there.
The resolution is up. I haven't posted the contract yet.
Okay. So we'll make sure that the contract is posted and is as available as we have in the past. Additionally, there will be a statement that will be posted tomorrow, notifying the community of the selection and also providing additional clarification regarding the recruitment process for folks. All right. So I just want to, I see I'm losing people. So I think right now may be a good time in the process. And I know I see Alex ready to go to get out of here before 9 o'clock. But can we just take a quick 15-minute break for members of council? I'm being a little generous. We're a little ahead of schedule. And you guys never return before 15 minutes anyway. I'll say 10, and then they'll be ready to convene at 15 minutes. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. All right, thanks so much. right. Thank you so much, Alex, for your patience as we have been active and committed to making sure we have a break before we enter into work sessions. All right, so the next work session for this evening are the proposed revisions to sidewalk and traffic calming policies. It's a 15-minute presentation followed by 45 minutes of Q&A. And with that, I'm going to turn the discussion over to Alex Freeman from our Housing and Community Development Department to provide us with a presentation on the administrative regulations to update traffic calming and new sidewalk request processes.
Thank you, Mayor. It is a mouthful when all added together. Good evening. My name is Alex. I'm the planner for City of Tacoma Park, and tonight I'm going to give a presentation on proposed administrative regulations to update the traffic calming and new sidewalk request processes. So the need to reevaluate these two policies was first formally identified in January 2021 by the Complete and Safe Streets Committee when they released their final set of recommendations that supported a review of these request processes. It's important to acknowledge, though, that these were never formally adopted by the City Council at the time. The following year, in 2022, City staff presented an update on traffic safety initiatives, referencing some of the recommendations from this committee. And the following year, this past October, City Council formally requested that City staff develop revised policies. Soon thereafter, the City Council also adopted the Public Space Management Plan, which recommended the review of existing resident infrastructure request processes found in Recommendation 3.2. Tonight, we are here as a presentation to ask for your confirmation that we're headed in the right direction before we enter the formal administrative regulation process. The existing policies to request new sidewalks or traffic calming measures are quite different. What we heard from City Council and agreed upon as staff is that the differences between what otherwise seem like relatively similar kinds of policies are confusing to the public, and there's no step for data analysis or evaluation in the current processes. The elements of the processes present concerns also related to equity. To help illustrate this, I wanted to review the two existing policy structures. So, the existing policy for new sidewalk requests takes the form of a City Council resolution. The policy was last updated in 2015. The process begins with a request to the city by a resident, the City Council as a whole, an individual City Council member in the affected area, or the city manager may make the request. A community meeting is then held to discuss the idea and is followed up with a mailed survey where residents can vote on whether or not they want to advance the project. If the response rate is at least 50% positive, then the project advances to a design stage. In the case of sidewalk projects, the city has a contract with a third-party firm that does much of the design work. After the designs are drafted, another meeting is held and another community vote. Additional meetings can be held if significant design changes are needed, but pending a response rate that's at least 50% positive, then the project advances to the work queue. The other process relates to traffic calming, and because that can be a jargony term that doesn't mean a lot to most people in the world, I wanted to review that in the municipal code, we've actually defined what traffic calming devices are considered. And they include signs, pavement markings, speed humps, raised walkways, flat top speed humps or speed tables as they're sometimes called, and other physical devices placed or installed on the highway, which is the jargony way of just saying any roadway, which limit access, restrict traffic flow, or channel or slow vehicle movement for the purpose of reducing traffic hazards and improving pedestrian safety. It's worth noting that this does not include traffic controls like stop signs, flashing beacons, or stoplights, which are not considered quote-unquote physical devices. It could be, however, interpreted to potentially include something like a bike lane or a sidewalk that extends into the roadway in certain situations or under certain conditions. So, the existing traffic calming policy, unlike the former, is an administrative regulation. It is not a City Council resolution. And that means that it interprets the existing municipal code. To initiate this, the process requires that residents submit a petition indicating that the residents of at least 2/3 of the household want one or more traffic calming devices to be installed on that street. Or the city council may make the request if the location is adjacent to a park or a school, or city staff may initiate it at their discretion. An eligible request then leads to a community meeting to discuss the project. After the community meeting requirement is satisfied, the administrative regulations call for a city council public hearing, at which point they can approve with changes or deny the request. And after this point, the project moves to design and implementation. So at present, the existing requested sidewalk and traffic calming projects, there are about 9 in various levels of process. In the design queue for new sidewalk requests, we have a sort of recently requested combined set of projects on Hodges Lane, Darwin Avenue, and Chestnut Avenue. As the design cost estimated to come out to around $86,000. There's also a request that is on hold currently because sidewalks already exist on one side of the street, and the city places a priority on trying to make sure that streets that don't have any sidewalks get one on one side first before we add second sides of the street to the equation. Also in the construction queue is a sidewalk at Belford Place. And then in the traffic calming queue, there are a number of projects that are sort of in limbo right now because there's no current mechanism to remove projects from the queue, but they also have not met the eligibility requirements to advance forward as far as the petition and community meeting processes. And these exist on Kansas Lane, the 7500 block of Jackson Avenue, Hayward Avenue and Larch, Central Avenue, and the 700 block of Houston Avenue, most of these due to insufficient signatures on the petition process. There's also in process, sort of outside of these processes, an additional traffic calming effort in the New Hampshire Gardens neighborhood, and that's currently underway and in discussion with the neighborhood association there. So, tonight we are proposing updates to both of these policies. First, we propose that both policies be brought into the same structure, which is that of an administrative regulation. City staff feel that this makes the policy more enduring than a city council resolution and better aligned with the format of other similar guidance on elements of the municipal code. The proposed new policy also has the proposed new policies also have nearly identical text and a nearly identical structure, with the intention of creating more clarity and comprehensibility between the two, except where there are needs for details that are different because of the context of the project. The proposed policy also removes requirements for resident petition to initiate a project. They add a staff evaluation phase early in the process, which is absent from both processes at present. And they lay out a structure that better allows the relevant departments and the city council to plan for how this impacts the budget as we look at projects into the future. So, in the proposed policies, anyone can, so I'm going to review the proposed policies. They are both proposed as 2 separate administrative regulations. The reason that they're separate is meant to be because they refer to different parts of the code. So combining them into a single administrative regulation, although it seems easier, is actually potentially adding more complexity in the long run. But in the proposed policy, anyone can initiate a request. Ideally, we'll get to a point where it's akin to a request through MyTKPK or a 311 request, including individual residents, city council members, or city staff. The new policies would eventually be made into a single request portal, although currently that is not the case because the city website is in transition and the city's use of GovQA is also at a moment where it's about to enter transition. So this is something that would be a process that we move into, hopefully in not so much time. All the new requests would be entered into, all the new requests would be entered into a staff evaluation process, which would be similar but a little bit different from each other. In the beginning, to develop what the evaluation system would look like for traffic calming, staff borrowed ideas and structure from the District Department of Transportation's system of prioritizing transportation safety and traffic calming measures called the longer acronym I'm forgetting, but it is known commonly as TSI 2.0, which is the updated version of their previous TSI system. And that they're a big city, so they funnel requests through an algorithm that uses data to prioritize projects, including crash data, but also demographics in the area and request volumes and all sorts of different things. A little more advanced than I think what we need for the city here, so we've borrowed the structure, but are looking for a slightly more manual version of that. For sidewalk request process, staff borrowed from the 2009 prioritization strategy proposed in a report from Tool Design and recommended by the Complete and Safe Streets Committee. Both of these were modified to create a weighted rubric that adheres to a set of criteria. Primarily, the categories of criteria fall into safety, which includes crash patterns, speeding counts, the use of county and state mapping efforts, including identified hotspots and predictive crash analyses, a category on equity that is something more of the demographic analysis that looks at vulnerable communities and demographics in the area, vulnerable road user trip generators, which is a sort of composite that we borrowed from both of the systems that I mentioned and pulled into one that made sense categorically for what we felt Takoma Park needed. So it focuses on places that generate a lot of users, and these include schools, community centers, senior housing, et cetera. And then the differences in these two systems between the two types of policy. For traffic calming, there is a roadway characteristics category, which looks at the geometry of the roadway and the presence of existing street infrastructure. And that shifts when we look at sidewalk requests to a modified category called identified population impact, which points to the number of people served and whether it was identified previously in planning efforts or larger master plan efforts. The rubric and scores are not yet finalized, which is why we don't have the full detailed set of those criteria listed out for you. We're in conversations now with colleagues at DDOT, as well as Alexandria, that has a similar system that is manual. So we're looking to borrow from things that are already working as best as possible. But the rubric and the scores would be shared online to aid in transparency and show people how those decisions are being made. In the process, the project is given a score that helps staff set the priority of the request. This is also the stage when projects that are determined to be infeasible, inappropriate, duplicative, or potentially harmful might be denied. We did not include a specific timeline by which residents might resubmit requests, but that is something to perhaps worth considering. Once a project advances through the evaluation project stage, it is determined to be something that the city should pursue, staff would then host a community meeting with the focus of discussing options and identifying unknown logistical challenges. All of this process would be ongoing throughout the year. However, to get into the project queue for the upcoming fiscal year, projects would need to be submitted at a yet-to-be-determined date in advance of the budgeting process. This is because the approval and advancement of these projects would be contingent on the approval of the City Council through the budgeting process. In advance of that process, city staff would publicize the current project queue to make the community aware what's in the queue, at what priority, and what is in the docket at present. Once a project is approved through the budget, the design process would begin. And this is a bit of a switch from the current process, which puts design stages earlier on and has design stages later on in a way that is hard to budget for and ends up extending the process substantially. Once it is sort of approved through the City Council budget, the formal design process would advance. Once those designs are developed, there would again be another community meeting to present the proposed designs for review, and upon design finalization, it would get put in the queue for construction. So, there it is, implementation. So then the project's added to the queue. So tonight we're here to confirm that we're on the right track, but theoretically, upon sort of finalization of the language and sign off from the city attorney's office, the policies would go through the administrative regulation process, which is summarized here as follows. First, there would be public notice required in the Tacoma Park newsletter that would open up a comment period of at least 30 days, unless the city council directs a longer period. There's also the opportunity for the city council to elect to hold a hearing at any point during this comment period. All of the comments through that period are collected by the city manager and by policy, the sort of quote unquote responsible city department, which would probably be a collaboration between Public Works and the planning division. We would take those comments, fold them into a final version of the regulation. The city council would be posed with the option to take action. Optionally, they could choose to accept, modify, withdraw, or take no action on the regulation as proposed. And then once it passes that step, we post publicly that the resolution, that the language is changed. We post the formal language publicly, and it goes into practice. Once it goes into practice, I think ideally we would like to start this in alignment with the fiscal year. We have talked about trying to sort of start this new review process starting July 1st of this year, supposing that we can get through all of the steps in advance of that before then, which I do think is quite feasible. And with that huge amount of information about a very technical set of documents, I'm happy to take any questions. For those who are interested at home to learn more about the existing policies, those can be found on the city's Public Works departmental website by searching in the search bar for traffic calming regulation and petitions or sidewalk design and construction. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right,
May I ask some administrative presentation questions before we do like other stuff? There were just a couple of things that were on here that I was confused about.
Okay, can you reserve those questions?
Sure.
You're going to be the second light.
All right, so.
Councilmember DeBall.
How much you want to bet I've got the same questions? I wanted to make sure I understood. So administrative regulations are not always sent to the city council. So you did say that the administrative regulations, once they go through this whole process, would go to the city council and then we could, okay, thank you. I didn't follow.
Wait 1 second, just want to make sure that.
I wasn't sure of the question. Is
sorry.
it that for the approval of an administrative
Yeah.
regulation?
Yes.
So, Jesse would know, the city clerk would know more thoroughly than I, but my understanding is that there is a stage at which after the public review period, the regulation can come before the city council and they can choose whether or not to take action on the language as proposed.
Okay.
And just as a point of, and I'm looking at our city clerk. So we went through the displacement policies where there was a public comment period. We separated out the first and second reading to allow for that public comment period to happen in between. In this case, would we need to do a similar approach or?
So the administrative regulation process is different than the process to adopt an ordinance.
Right.
So the regulation process really doesn't require, council gets to review, but does not need to take any action unless the council chooses to take some kind of action. So you could say, no, we want to hold a public hearing. No, we want you to withdraw this regulation. We don't like it at all. So the council can do various things. But if council decides to take no role, it's just an administrative process that is published, and there's public review, comment, and then the final version is published.
Great, thank you very much.
So then my comment would be that in this case, we probably would want to have it come to the council because this has been a big deal. That's just my opinion. as opposed to it's an administrative regulation, go ahead and do it.
Well, in fact, the facilities regulations are gonna come to you in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, and I was gonna
because
have the
that
same question.
is a
about that.
similar thing that the council has a special interest in.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you for going through the presentation in detail. When you talked about the evaluation, the proposed evaluation section, you talked about a manual version of a big city TSI for traffic calming, and I didn't quite follow. Would you mind repeating all of that again?
Yes, sorry about that. I'll also move this back so this is on the screen. The current process with the District Department of Transportation is a similar process to what is being worked on right now, which is a weighted prioritization system.
And the district, the county?
The district, Department of
state district.
Transportation. Sorry, DC's.
Oh, you're borrowing from DC. Okay,
Yes.
I just didn't get all that.
Yes, no worries. And they actually have a really informational website. If you look up TSI 2.0, that breaks down their full process and their structure. So what we talked with their staff about how their process works. They generally really like how it's going. The difference that we would look into is that they receive thousands of requests every year, and they can't possibly keep up with that volume. We have a much smaller area. We have a much smaller volume of requests. That could change with the new policy, but so they hired consultants and programmers to design an algorithm that is vastly more complex and expansive than what we would need locally, but they connected us with staff at the City of Alexandria who do a similar thing, but using more spreadsheets and manual calculations that I think would be more suitable to both our staffing capacity and need. But it uses similar sets of data that are identified around the request relating to safety and equity and demographics and those sorts of things. And those factors get funneled in, weighted, and sort of spit out a prioritization score.
So one of my comments on this is that I don't think we want or need to lock ourselves into a particular methodology in the administrative regulation. However, one word, safety, and nothing else doesn't say to me that there's a data-driven process, there's a logical process, there's an evaluation system, it does all of what you said, there's just one word, safety. And so I think that I would really like to see the data-driven part fleshed out a little in some way. My second, for both, yes, for the sidewalks as well as the, well,
not want to have all this back? I mean.
well, and I'm not clear on whether some of these are included in the process that Alex just defined, but my concern is that it sounds very, very arbitrary, and it doesn't sound like what you just described. And that's true for the sidewalk section as well. My second comment is, I'm not sure I completely buy that we need to have two separate administrative regulations. I heard your explanation, and that makes sense, but I'd like you all to take another look at that, because I see that you cite two different parts of the Tacoma Park Code at the beginning of each of them, but if that's the only real difference, plus a little more detail on sidewalk, I'm not clear that we need to, but I don't feel that strongly about that. My other comment, which is perhaps the most substantive, is I should say thank you very much. This is major improvement, but I don't see the systemic piece. For example, when you describe traffic calming devices, that's not traffic calming policies, as you said yourself, and it doesn't include stop signs, it doesn't include one-way streets, which it doesn't include looking at whether the speed bump would be better on the road next door. I don't see how that broader look fits in here. And at the same time, you say that the regulation says that anybody within a quarter mile of the site can request it, and they can request a specific thing, but maybe that's not the spot and maybe that's not the specific thing that makes the most sense. So how do we figure that out in the evaluation stage? That's not clear to me at all. So I have some more specific comments, but those are the three things that jumped out at me when I looked at it today. Yeah, some things like who are the community stakeholders and some of the specifics of the language, but those overall questions are the ones that I'm still puzzling on. That said, again, much better approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. Can we go back to the first two slides in this presentation? I had some I really did have some general questions about the presentation before we got into the actual discursive conversation. After we get from this page, can we go to the next page? So then we're talking about this resolution. I think maybe on the critical aspect of this, let's just cut to the chase here. I would like for someone who is on the staff currently to explain the value of not making substantive changes to the code itself with regard to these issues, and to implement a process that is administrative in nature. Now, I'll ask that for a couple of different reasons. Without going through the pound of flesh that you were here to avoid anyone getting, so I appreciate you taking this lump for the team. There's nothing about any of this that would give me any more confidence that any of these things will be met with some degree of the nexus between an assessment of data and a professional staff opinion. And the reason for that is that there have been too many times in the context of this process where theoretically professional staff opinions or analysis could have been generated and wasn't. Now, if the allegation here is that administratively we just didn't have the stuff to do it, then I'd like to see what the code says and what your opinions of the code are. If the allegation here is that, well, the things that we have administratively here just didn't get to the point of looking at the abject disequity on streets like 4th Avenue or Ritchie Avenue, or I can think of a couple of other ones, in the context of whatever the professional opinions of people who work these jobs are. So, I have two questions that I would like to have answered. They are, what does the code say with regard to traffic calming as implemented and understood by the staff? Insofar as that is true, why is it that these regulations led to a situation that we can actually point to promoted some degree of non-equitable distribution of these things, and then the critical aspects of this particular plan don't say anything about how you're going to generate the conclusions whereby these things are no longer going to occur? That to me seems sort of odd. I would even say it is odd specifically because we had a complete streets committee and they came up with a bunch of recommendations. And for whatever reason, the council or whatever, you're gonna put the first thing that's in this thing is the council didn't do it. Fine. The next thing is, well, if we had these recommendations and all this stuff is just gonna be administrative anyway, why didn't you do it then? Then the third thing would be, in light of these things, given the fact that structurally, if these issues are issues of implementation of the code, then why wouldn't we just implement the code? Because it seems to me that if we are going through the administrative processes of bureaucratizing, doing things, at the same time as we are being told that technical expertise is necessary, but we're also being told that people don't have the technical expertise because we need traffic studies and this and that and whatever, then what we are doing is engendering another process whereby negative inertia will continue on a process that we have been talking about for at least a year, that I got elected to talk about, and that substantively no one seems to be paying much attention to.
Councilmember Small.
Insofar, I have one more thing to say. Insofar as that is true, I would like to say that as we approach these issues and we look at whatever sorts of ameliorative steps are being made in New Hampshire Avenue, or New Hampshire Gardens, and whatever else, it's not going to get to the fact that someone died. It's not going to get to the fact people are getting hit by cars. It's not going to get to the fact that at some point we can't have a situation where when you ask people direct questions about their professional expertise, they don't have answers. But then they come up with administrative things that say we're going to rely on professional expertise when it's just a cycle of nothingness. And I want to know why.
So Councilmember Small, and definitely thank you, Director Braithwaite, for stepping up here. I think one of the things is, I think is important for us to make a clear distinction about are what is in the code versus what was implemented via council resolution, right? So what is in the code simply defines what these different terminologies are. So what is a cul-de-sac? What is a speed hump? What are those things? What is being referred to here is a council resolution in which in Council Resolution 2015-32, the City Council defined what that process is for traffic calming. And then that would mean that a future council and outlines in grave detail, perhaps in more detail than I ever would have imagined someone detailing in a resolution, what the process that staff are required to follow in terms of sidewalk requests and other traffic calming requests. So what is before us right now is in order for staff to modify these processes, then the current council will need to actually, in essence, pass new resolutions that align with the process that we would like to see happen. So I do want to encourage you to take a look at that resolution because it does outline that process. That was something that was done by the council in 2015.
Here's the thing about that. Having looked at these resolutions, I will begin again and say my statement again. Because I don't want anyone to misunderstand the fact that I would not have read such things. If it is the case that we are dealing with two administrative regulations, one of which is dated 96-1, which I would assume would be 1996, and the other one is related to a resolution that was done in 2015.
Right.
That indicates any number of things, not the least of which being a big old gap of time in which we were actively administrating a policy that didn't seem to make a lot of sense to these people up here. That's a separate issue, because again, this council didn't vote on the regulations. That's not what I am asking about. What I am asking about is, if we have a code, and the code says we are required by code to do X, I would like for the staff to tell me what that is. And then at the point at which that happens, I would like for the staff to tell me how we got from 96 to 2015. And then I would like for someone to tell me why in 2015 we made the change to include the concerns of community associations or neighborhood associations with regard to sidewalks, but not with regard to traffic calming or any of the other things that we've been clamoring about. At some point, someone, somewhere in this building, either during the daytime or at night, is going to just explain how on earth we got to here. And I don't care who thinks they are under the bus for it. I don't care if it's the previous council. I don't care if it's somebody who used to work here. I don't care which silo it is. Just explain to me how you could think that this was cool and why you think this gets to it before we talk about how this doesn't get to it. Thank you.
Sure. Well, one thing I do want to just make sure that everyone on council understands is it's not fair to ask staff to read the minds of council. Their job is to implement what council passes. So we can go back and find the folks from 2015 who passed this resolution that gave lots of detail dictating to staff how to establish the traffic calming and sidewalk request policies and procedures. It is very clear that this was an act of council. It was an act of council. So, I mean, I think, I don't know if Ms. Braithwaite was around and could explain the rationale for why council passed this resolution that was
If we're going to do it that
descriptive.
way, Talisa or Mayor, I apologize. Then I would like for someone to explain to me why there was an absence of an active council with really substantive recommendations on tap as well.
I'm not sure I can get to the bottom of your question, but I want to specifically emphasize there is no language in the code that defines traffic calming or sidewalks. The only thing in the city code defines elements of traffic calming. That is the only thing you'll find in the code. The councils at the time, first in 96, that's when the city evolved to a traffic calming process. The council at that time did it by regulation, and they set up the process that currently exists to this day. And councils since that time have never changed that regulation. So that has been the process that staff has been directed to follow for traffic calming. In 2012, there was a community groundswell for sidewalks. The city, up until that point, had no process for building sidewalks. We didn't do it. Whatever sidewalk was in place was what was there. No new sidewalks. There was no funding, no process. So the council at the time went through a incredibly detailed process of defining what they wanted to see in the sidewalk process. So it was established in 2012, and again, this was written by council. Staff was not involved in the details, every single point of the process. Why they chose a resolution instead of a regulation, I think has to do, it's more of a reflection of the council at the time, because regulations can kind of be outside the council. Regulations can get implemented and council doesn't even necessarily need to take an action on them. So I think in that particular time, the council very much had their DNA and fingerprints on the process. So they wanted to pass a resolution. They wanted to say, this is the process we will follow for sidewalks. You have to have this amount of signatures, you have to get this 50%, you have to have this amount of community meetings. They spelled it out point by point. And we've been implementing that since the time that it was passed. It was amended in 2015 to try to make it a little less, a little more open and easy for people to submit requests, but not much else was changed about the process. Say what you will about liking it, not liking it, it has been ingrained. There is no city code that defines traffic calming or sidewalk processes. And the city has done hundreds of traffic calming and sidewalk processes since implementation. So it's not like nothing's been done for 30 years. Lots of projects have been done. I think over time, people's understanding of what's most effective changes. We are a speed hump happy city. In the 90s and the 2000s, this place loved speed humps. We're now evolving beyond that to look at more effective and equitable traffic calming processes that include pedestrians, that include bicyclists, not just thinking about cars. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into it other
No,
than
please do.
there
You're
is
doing
no-
a fantastic job, and
there
I
is no city
appreciate
code.
this.
Yeah, there
Thank
is no
you.
city code that defines it.
And the only point in having someone say that out loud is that it is important to recognize that not everybody who is getting a pound of flesh or a wet towel or a wet willy in the ear or something is getting it because they are bad or not good at their jobs. They have been put in unfair positions by people in attempting to implement things that by right should have changed. And then you end up with somebody like me who just wants to know how this happened. Thank you very much. Sincerely, Daryl.
Thank you. Council Member Fulcher.
Great. I think it's going to be really helpful for us to actually see the rubric because, you know, some of the things that we're talking about right now about not seeing the equity piece and not understanding the safety piece, just as the label safety, if we could actually, you know, see something similar to the beautiful work you guys did for the public space management plan, that would be really helpful for us to understand if this is something that we're in support of or not. As far as initiation, I think it would be helpful if there was an initiation process that included, you know, safety issues in an area, would flag it somehow. You know, we're seeing that pedestrians are getting struck in an area. That means that that no one should have to initiate that process. Like that should be setting off red flags that that there's a safety concern in that area. And then also I'm kind of wondering, you know, for sidewalks, if there's just in general a lack of sidewalks in an area, how does that fit into the sidewalk creation? And then, you know, Councilmember Dybala was bringing up looking at things systemically. And I just don't know, I don't know how well we can do that without traffic studies, right? And what the trade-off is between like, well, here seems like a good spot as far as our experience in putting in a speed bump versus, okay, let's spend, and I don't even know how much traffic studies cost. I keep on hearing that they cost a lot, right? Like I can't name a number off the top of my head, which you guys probably can. So do we want to spend that money on traffic study, or do we want to make our best educated guess? And I do think that you guys, you know, have the expertise in public works to make some pretty good guesses about where the traffic calming devices are helpful. And then my last sort of question is, I didn't really understand when it comes to project approved for implementation via city council budget is like step 5, and then proposed design developed. Is this based off, like, is step 5 coming before step 6? Is that because, like, in general, you guys are pretty good at guessing at how much a project is going to cost, and so we're able to make an estimate about how much a project costs before, and able to vote on that before we actually get the proposed design developed? Because, you know, how does that work? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, I'll try to work through those questions backwards. And
Yeah.
If I miss anything, please.
Sorry,
let
I
me
know that was a lot.
As far as approving sort of a theoretical budget item for a project that's in the queue, that is a pretty standard process, I think, within Public Works' budgeting process, where we can reach out to colleagues in the field or consultants we previously worked with to give rough estimates for how much they think a certain scope of work would be, and that usually, you know, modulated to, you know, any specifics that might be specific to the location. That's sort of an easy way to map out kind of how much we think an item will be budgeted for, or how much it would cost. Of course, that could change a little bit, and that is something that we would, set our scope of work to match that cost estimate. Obviously, projects that continue over a longer period of time also that perhaps would go through multiple budgeting cycles would require a different way of looking at that as well. To the question about like whether or not a traffic study would be required, I think that in the staff evaluation phase, that would be the time. I mean, currently most of our traffic calming work is done in-house, and much of the design process for sidewalk installation is contracted out for the first part and then brought back in-house for the end part. For projects that we receive, I think usually the way we're imagining that we would receive a request is less I want a speed bump right here, and more, I've observed too much speeding on my street, or someone was struck at an intersection, and that through this evaluation process, staff would then look at options for what would be needed to start to address that problem. And that would be where we could start to see, is this a quick, small tweak? Is this something that is much bigger and like corridor scale or neighborhood scale? And that would be when we would need to decide, as far as budgeting out the cost of a project, this project might be more expensive because we would need to have a traffic study, or we'd need to bring in additional design engineering to make this work because it's on a tricky slope and our usual work doesn't account for that, or something like that. And obviously, Director Braithwaite can jump in and correct me on anything that I misrepresented.
No, I think you've done a great job. I was just wanted to speak to your question you raised about initiation. One of the, I think, challenges of the current process is we really don't feel there's a role for city staff. And in fact, in very few instances where there was interest on the part of Safe Routes to School coordinator to initiate a sidewalk, our process didn't enable that to happen because we had to have a petition or we had to have the community meeting. They weren't part of the community per se. So one of the things that I think this new proposal does is it brings in that element. So what we fully anticipate is that in preparation for developing the list of potential projects for council to consider for funding in the upcoming fiscal year, city staff will be at the table, community members will be at the table, council members will be at the table. We'll get all that information in, and in fact, it'll help us sort of prioritize because we'll have a date certain where we're going to make that decision. So everybody's got to get into the pool by this date, and then we look at all the potential possibilities and together just determine what's going to get funded to move forward. That gets redone year after year, so there's an ability to plan for it. So community members that missed the first queue know that next year we're going to get our request in by whatever date we set, March, April, I don't know. So that that really helps to also speak to the equity piece citywide, so that we can be looking at, are we putting sidewalks in places that don't have a lot of sidewalks? Or are we putting sidewalks in places that already are pretty well, sidewalk heavy? So it can help address that. Rather than just individual requests, we can be making systematic decisions. And we could even go so far as to say we want to determine a certain number of traffic calming projects versus sidewalk projects and prioritize those. So that's just the piece I wanted to speak to, that the initiation, the issue about accidents or other safety concerns, staff are going to be super aware of that. Police are going to be super aware of that, and we'll be sure to put something in the queue for us to consider at the point in which we're evaluating all the potential projects that could get done.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say that right now, the way that the traffic calming, where you can say, I want a speed bump versus like, give me a recommendation about how to address the traffic safety, to me doesn't exactly make sense, because like, maybe I think what I want is a speed bump, but maybe that's not necessarily the best way to address it. So, I mean, I understand that residents might not love losing that power to be like speed bump versus make my traffic calmer.
Right.
But I do think that there's something to be gained by not glorifying the speed bump,
Yeah,
by, you know, allowing you guys to use the tools that you have available to you, and by using some professional thought in like what's the best way to address things.
Well, and I think we share that view that by enabling projects to come in, we anticipate that the application project will tease out a lot more information from people, like where is the problem? How do you see the problem? You know, we'll be asking for a lot of anecdotal information. But from that, we feel like we can potentially design for a better solution than what might be able to be reached by the neighborhood kind of getting petitions, because you know who doesn't like it and who does like it, and you got to kind of meet the lowest common denominator. But in cases where we're really using the science to evaluate this, we can develop the best solution. So I think it will help elevate our traffic calming approaches, as well as give us a level playing field and an annual queue in which we start the process each year over again, and make sure we're reaching all the touch points we need to around the city.
And then one last piece on the procedural stuff. We talked a little bit about possibly having like a public hearing, but if not a public hearing, maybe at least putting it on the agenda for the next, for these 30 days, provide like a public comment period during the meeting, even if it's not going to be its own standalone meeting, which, I think might be enough, but I don't know.
I think that, just kind of jumping in, that was one of my questions. Well, I have a couple questions, so I guess I'll just jump in the queue. So the first thing I like to do is look for my name, and I'm not seeing where the mayor's role is in this. I see how the city council members can request to the city manager for traffic calming within their board
That's a fair
boundaries.
point, because otherwise you have no juice. Oh, it's weak mayor, that's a good point, it should be in there.
So I'm not sure, can the mayor request things across the entire city? So then therefore, would be the next bullet?
I think that's a bit how we were interpreting it, but we
But
can be
it's, but this
explicit if that's
basically
helpful.
says within your ward, the borders of your ward.
Yeah,
So what would be the
administratively.
borders of the ward for the mayor? So then, would that then mean that the mayor would need to
Because if I
basically
get
be
double-
citywide?
if I get double
Or
juice.
do I just have domain over my house?
Double juice in Ward 6. That is the obvious answer. We have
Or I
and-
don't have a role at all.
No, double.
I think our
It's like-
interpretation in writing this was that all members of the council would have an opportunity
It's
to
like
weigh
Dungeons
in.
and Dragons, and we get a +2 on the rolls. That's what it is.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine with being a tiebreaker, but I thought that was a point that I'm like, oh, okay, so, the mayor,
It's a good
doesn't really submit.
clarification, and I think also reflects a deficit in the existing policies, because I don't believe those call out specifically the mayor either. So,
okay. I'm
so we can
powerless.
change that.
And so I kind of want to go back to Councilmember Fulcher's point of the public engagement and the public, like the community aspect of this. And one piece is, it seems like a resident can request, like these requests, within a quarter mile from their home, which is about like 20 blocks or something, depending on how many blocks is in a quarter mile.
I think about it in like distance walking, which is about a 5-minute walk.
Yeah, so
A quarter.
I don't know. We'll do the math. We'll Google it later. But it does kind of seem like the length in which folks can request away from their home, because I Googled it earlier, it looked like it's like 20 blocks. You can actually request, I guess that's more like 2 to 3 blocks away, for like city blocks away from your home, but it looks like when you're actually advertising the change, it's on the block where the request was made, or trying to make sure that we're, you know, the problem, the pitfall, and perhaps in a weird way, the benefit of the petition process, not trying to go back to it, it's, I don't want it, but it forced residents to go door to door to notify people of what they wanted to install and where. And so without that, then the onus is on us to make sure that we are communicating to residents that may be impacted by the change, to make them aware, right? So that was one thing that I just wanted to make sure of, like in terms of, you know, are we doing mailers for, like, currently the process, if you have a sidewalk, and there's a vote that's necessary, you would do those mailers, and within that boundary of the impacted homes, they would get something in the mail, letting them know something is happening. And I'm just trying to make sure I can mentally think through how this notification process would work versus, albeit not ideal, but the petition and the vote process, which required this direct outreach. And it seems a little bit more general here.
Yeah. I think we'll probably have to work out some of the details. I think our concept was that the initiation could be fairly generic and general, but that for those projects that were elevated to the queue and passed the rubric and met our criteria, and we're gonna go into design, we'd then have the full flushed out community-based process that we have now, which would be mailers to every household affected by the area, so we could define the affected area just like we define now. Because it would definitely be our intention to have community meetings reviewing, you know, sidewalks and traffic calming. Right now, there really is no community review of traffic calming. So it would add that element, but we'd have public meetings where we either at a staff level would be, proposing, making the proposals, or our engineering team would be making the proposals. So we could further define in the community meeting process the affected area that needs to be part of it. But I think we would also try to keep it global so that everybody that was interested could know, but also very specifically make sure that we're touching the people that are directly impacted from the proposed change.
Yeah, I think that's something that would be good. And one other point about the queue, right? And so what I've experienced is more or less the items, like the massive installations, the sidewalks with the bump outs, with the, you know, the big ticket items, definitely queued up. But in those cases where it's a speed hump, right? How is the plan to kind of prioritize? Because I know that a lot of times for the smaller things like a speed hump, if the trucks are in the area and it's small and we can capitalize on the fact that we already have workers around, we typically would just, it's a cost saving mechanism to just have them do the work. So have you all thought about how the intensive nature of a item in the queue may impact where it sits in the queue?
Again, I may be being too optimistic, but I think our thinking behind this is by having the annual process and the discussion in front of council, we can then create the calendar for the year based on the list of projects that are there. So it'll very much give us our ability to say, this is a heavy lift project that's gonna take all of 12 months, so we've gotta start now and we're gonna work at it. Whereas this is a small project, won't take much, it's gonna be quicker. So we can schedule it. We know our construction cycle. We know when we're likely gonna be doing street work or other work. So we can plan for it. I may be overly optimistic, but right now, any given year, we don't know what's gonna come in. We know what we might be starting the year with. We know what what we want to build. We know we want to build Belford Sidewalk next fiscal year. So we know that one, but everything else is, it's a surprise basis.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, there, Councilmember Small, you're in the queue, and I'm reclaiming my time. So, so I think that's really helpful, and so just trying to make sure that piece is clear. And then I don't want to, because I know that we have a whole queue of folks that are waiting. My last thing is, the painful pieces of like sidewalk projects always comes in at the end when it's the final decision about a design. And right now the vote process kind of gives us a little leverage to say, well, y'all, books closed. Vote came in 51% to 48%. We're moving forward. What do you all think in terms of this new process, in terms of, is the final decision around we're done now in the hands of our staff, which is great. We're all at this dais just gonna have to do a little extra work, right?
Well, and I'm glad you raised that issue, because I think we need to be really clear about the change in policy, both in all kinds of ways, because it will be a process where once it gets in the queue and started, the assumption is it's gonna be completed. And you will be the recipients of public backlash from those folks that are unhappy about the idea.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to, Councilmember DeBall, do you mind if I put you on hold? Because I think you've already gone. Councilmember Gibson, you have not spoken on this.
Spoken.
Okay, Councilmember Gibson, go ahead.
Where to begin? A lot was covered here. I think going back, the rubric, as it's called, is key here. And I'm looking at right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items that are specifically mentioned as part of that criteria. On the sidewalk, I would suggest you might want to consider environmental impact as another criteria, but knowing what those mean and how you gauge them is key. I mean, it really, it's essential. When I looked at your outline here of steps and I saw evaluation using data-driven approach, it strikes me that we've got the plan as proposed here is in some sense a low bar. Any resident can make a suggestion. A low bar versus what we now have, which is an onerous process that we want to at least, if not get rid of, reduce. I'm just wondering if we want to basically encourage, well, two things. One is encourage petitions without any kinds of percentage that you got to do, but encourage the neighborhood that's involved to involve each other. I contacted one of my constituents about how that process went, and she did say, yes, it was onerous, but it was really good to build up a connection with that neighborhood, to get people interested, to get the buy-in, to get their comments. Going back to the evaluation stage, it strikes me that it doesn't make sense to use data-driven approach to assess feasibility and priority at such an early stage. Now, Daryl, you sort of referenced sort of an in-between, a preliminary evaluation stage. So I'm like, that's what I want to see in your sequence here, such that this doesn't have a chance. I mean, why would we spend staff time to run through all the data to look at one man or one woman's pitch to do X? I'm just wondering if we don't need a pre-evaluation review stage that kind of, separates the sheep from the lambs. Just for your sake of your time and also the residents' time. And so we got two things that I'm kind of suggesting. One is that sort of a pre-review stage, being real clear what it is in terms of its feasibility, its cost, et cetera, without going through the whole 9 yards. And then I also do think that we actually do want to encourage neighborhood engagement, neighborhood associations or housing groups that to work together And I do think that a petition process, encouraged but not demanded, without limits, might be considered, or some way to encourage engagement. And that way you don't have so many kind of lone persons doing their own thing on the side. Anyhow, those are a couple of my concerns. There's some definitional stuff, but I'll leave it at that. Those 2 points at this point.
Can I make a couple
Yeah,
responses
please do.
to that? To the idea about a petition, I think you're right. You're very right in that there is definitely some value, and we talked back and forth about this on staff, about asking residents to build consensus themselves. However, and so to that point, I think that nowhere in the proposed administrative regulation precludes residents from self-organizing and building support for a project. I think that where we imagined as we were designing this out is that in the evaluation stage, the evaluation was not as much how to do it, but staff looking at data to see that there was a need, and that if it passed the muster for there being a need, then we decided that it will happen, and that the future versions of community engagement are less if it's going to happen and more how it's going to happen.
So that evaluation is more narrowly needs-based. It's not the full thing. That needs to be spelled out then. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that just looking at, is this a legitimate need or not, will separate the lambs from the sheep.
Yeah, because there will be projects that are forward
And with regard to resident, if we just use resident hyphen, or residents to suggest that it doesn't have to be an individual resident, I mean, we could go on, but that at least gives it a little bit more of an opening for groups, or of more than one that can make a otherwise it sounds like you can only do it individually. Yeah, and that's not what you want.
Well, and I think it may not be implicit, it is implicit in my mind here, but one of the things we're trying to add to our process is the ability to stop an unwarranted project
Yeah,
early on.
right.
Right now in our processes, we don't. If we get a request for a traffic calming or sidewalk in an area that we do not think is a high priority, there is no process that allows us to say, this really shouldn't be a priority, we've got much more important things to do. So baking in this initial evaluation data is a bit of a fact find. You know, are there accidents there? We'll involve the police, we'll do traffic counts. If the report is they're speeding and the police go through there and there's no speeding, we're gonna say, there's no speeding. It's not going to rank well on the priority list. We're going to be looking at those projects that do show 85th percentile high speeding levels. So the idea of this initial evaluation is to enable us to fact find, to pull forward the best projects that meet
Right.
most of our criteria with an eye towards equity, fairness, effectiveness,
And need.
and need.
Yeah, that needs to be a little bit more clearly spelled out, because it looks like that data-driven process to approach feasibility, et cetera, that might come back later.
Yeah,
that-
but I don't want to
or two-
minimize
two-step.
that, because I think this will be a bit of a,
Lift?
the people will not be very happy that their potential request is going to be held up to scrutiny of some facts and details. So we don't enter that lightly, but we think it's a very important change and improvement to our process.
Thank you.
And I appreciate Councilmember Gibson bringing up the fact that, you know, volume, right? If people don't have to take the time to gain that consensus, it could impact the fact that if a bunch of individual requests come through, that there could be a lot of volume. I think that we also have to think about how that juxtaposes with how certain segments of our community are not organized to have like a neighborhood association. There may be blocks of a community where we have primarily immigrant residents who don't fully understand, the process enough to kind of navigate the world that is petitions and contacting the community, or contacting the government. And so I think one of the major reasons why I'm a proponent for getting rid of the petition process is it eliminates some of the barriers to access to these types of safety needs that segments of our community have, that otherwise have prevented them from being able to get some of the much needed traffic calming that they need. So, but I hear you. I think, we do have to be concerned about volume, because that was one of the ways to kind of streamline things a bit.
Right, and we can bring everyone to the table that needs to be to the table without reducing the value that a neighborhood group has. And that's what it seems like we're doing.
Yep. All right, so, okay, I think Kara hasn't gone. Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. I know that some of these points are going to be a little bit repetitive, but I think they bear repeating, for one thing. One is, I am also a strong proponent of seeing a more data-driven approach pop out of this administrative procedure right at the outset. I don't know if I'm just misunderstanding. I didn't feel like it popped out as in terms of, I think, is it okay if I use the language that you were about to use? Master map of the city showing, there's already the interactive map that we have of the crash data, the sidewalks that are missing, and there's some basic analysis of that to me deserves to be laid out right at the front and center, right at the outset, and saying, hotspot, 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 these need to be addressed. This is really high priority. I think the council would really benefit from that, and I guess I would like to see that right front and center of this. Whether that's what gets pursued right away can partially come from discussion as Director Braithwaite was describing. So to me, that wasn't popping out of this clearly. And I think that gets back to maybe, I really appreciated the depth that you went into on describing what you meant by the safety, social equity, and what those were based on. And I was wondering even whether we could use some of the public space management plan rubric for this, but it sounds like you've got this all pretty well thought out. I guess, it sounds like you are on the right track, but because the definitions weren't provided, we couldn't see the data-driven part of that. So that will help a lot in the future. And then getting to the mayor's point about public engagement, I had some very specific concerns about that, and I think it relates directly to Councilmember Gibson, your concern about notifications, because that's the first thing that really popped out at me next to data. Let me just go up here to my notes. I think procedure 1C says you can do such and such. You can print flyers. You can do posted signage, or you can do this other thing. To me, the print flyers, just as a for example, in a lot of my neighborhoods, I know where there are a lot of immigrant communities, a lot of other people. Those are absolutely essential. I would not want it to be an or, I'd want it to be an and. Something that hits every single household is, and not just the newsletter. It's got to be something that's sort of in your face, because you're not necessarily going to have the petition. And at the same time, I appreciate the fact that this is a very, very labor-intensive process and puts a lot of onus and burden on someone. And it's like, who's going to do that? But it needs to be an and. And then, sorry, just let me scan through. Also, I'd like to see that some of these things are made available on the city's website. That language was missing from the notifications. I think that's a place where a lot of people need to be able to go quickly, and that was not in there. And excuse me, let me go back to my notes here. So I think that to answer your question, I think you are on the right track, but that specificity is missing in some of this language that I would want to see to feel like what you're presenting here will be understood by a future staff in the way that I hear you explaining it, including a lot of the procedures, Director Braithwaite, that you were just describing to us about how this stakeholder engagement process would be carried out. None of that was outlined here. You know, what does a community meeting look like? What does the process you described that involves the council negotiating over this process look like in action? Because if without all of those details and the definitions of the processes, any future council or set of staff can interpret this really differently, and then we kind of go back to the same way of doing things where maybe some set of staff is not so inclined to use data and they kind of manipulate the system to, you know, to whatever it is that they wanted to achieve at that time, and that's not what we want. And then my last question for you is, you know, we asked for this, although it's been asked for a long time. We asked for it in a season of lots of busyness and lots of things that were being demanded of you. Can I honestly ask you, does the staff feel like you are really ready to present this to us? Do you need more time to work out some of the basics, or did you sort of have to put this together feeling like, I wish we could have just a little more time even to get these basics down? And that's a genuine, honest question, because we know we rushed you in a way. We rushed you in a way. We were eager because it's been a long time that we've been asking for this, but it's also a hard thing to get right. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. To the last point, I do feel like this is a good, I do feel like I can stand behind these proposals as proposed. I think to some of the comments that have been made tonight, there's definitely room for some tweaks and some clarifications. And I think that language clarifying is really the thing that gets most sacrificed when timelines are short. So I think that pulling some of those out was really important. As far as when we would move this to the next stage, it at a minimum has to align with the publication of the newsletter, which we missed the deadline for a February publication. So at the soonest, the proposal for this and the public comment period would not start until those newsletters land in the March newsletter. So we have time still to, clarify things, discuss with our colleagues in other jurisdictions that have done similar systems. And I feel pretty confident that we can pull together something that we can really stand strongly behind.
Okay. And I'm sorry, may I just say one more thing about that? It's really quick.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
sorry,
I just want to remind colleagues that we are over
Way
our,
over.
our hour allotted time for this, and I have a lot of lights, and a lot of people are on second rounds, so if you
Yeah, I'll
be
make it
very,
quick.
very quick. I'm
Yep,
going to give
sorry,
us
I
an
meant to-
extra 10 minutes on this, and then we're going to have to close the discussion.
I also wanted to emphasize that one of the things that I think needs specification here in the notifications is related to putting them in a language that can be understood. That's been a real impediment to mailers and whatnot and postings. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm trying to be mindful of folks who haven't had a chance to speak. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll be brief. First of all, thank you for all the work you've put into this and the presentation tonight and being here at this late hour. It says that anyone can file a petition as long as within a quarter mile of their primary residence. And I have a concern about that, or a question about that, or an unease about that. The first thing in question, though, is that a linear quarter mile, or is that a circumference of a quarter mile?
It is undefined at
That's
present.
what I thought. So my unease is that just based on what I've seen in the past, when there can be some community contention when people are reporting things that are in closer to other people's homes than they are to their own. I don't have a solution, but I just wonder if there isn't a better restriction to put on that than a quarter of a mile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens, and now I'm going through round two in order of lights. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. Just following up on a couple of points that different council members made, going back to Councilmember smallest discussion about what's in the code. So I looked, and I see now why you might have done 2 regulations. So they both say that they are, yeah, so one is actually in the charter Article 10, yeah. So I guess I would still think if we could do one, it'd be great, but if you haven't checked with the city attorney, you might need to. And yeah, there's no, yes, you can build sidewalks, yes, you can do traffic calming, but it doesn't actually say anything more than that. That is really amazing. Then there's this big chunk of detail about speed bumps. So one of my questions, code-wise, is whether that should still stay there if there's going to be an administrative regulation. I'll let you guys work that out. But also to the point of the history of this, in the beginning, you note that the Safe Streets Committee issued a report. You note that we had a meeting in October 22nd, October 2022, but you don't mention the resolution in October 2022 that directed the staff to basically develop new procedures based on the Complete Streets recommendations. So I do feel that we have addressed this more than once in the old council. So thank you for getting us to this point. And my last question had to do with a question that someone brought up in public comment, in written comment, and related to the hotspot analysis that Councilmember Honzak mentioned, sidewalk gap inventory. I don't know if that's the way to do it, but they're both the same kind of thing. Looking at the bigger picture, I said that earlier. I wasn't specific enough about what I meant. So that's the kind of thing I meant. What are the systems and data that allow us to look a little more broadly than one street? And I also heard what both Councilmembers Honzak and Gibson said about allowing different kinds of initiation and different kinds of community input from different neighborhoods where there aren't neighborhood associations, and where maybe it is one person because there is only one person that feels comfortable doing that. But then in other neighborhoods where there's a whole infrastructure of people who work together all the time. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, 5 minutes.
County Safe Streets bill. Did you look at it? Did that help any?
Sorry, which?
County Safe Streets bill, the one that just went through? I'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Time check, 5 minutes and 31 seconds. Councilmember Fulcher.
I would really benefit from seeing the pros to keeping this as 2 policies, if that's the way we're going to move. And then if it seems like that's not the way to go, I would appreciate maybe council moving that we would ask the attorney to bring this into one policy, that we would ask for attorney time to do that. So that's one.
Okay.
And that's after we see the rubric, because I think that we all still need to see the rubric in order to be comfortable with the direction that we're going in. And then 2, as far as like the petition goes, I think that it's helpful to have tools available to talk to your neighbors about what you're trying to do, left up on the website. So like, let's not necessarily remove the petition. Like, we can say it's not necessary, but maybe we can provide people with tools. Not everybody just walks up to their neighbor and starts talking to them like I would do. So yeah, just I'm asking, maybe we leave up tools for people to have those conversations with their neighbors to make Tacoma Park a happier place for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, just real quickly, it may have been onerous for you guys, but it was very helpful to me to go through those small group meetings with the Public Space Management Plan. My suggestion is that you do the same here, that you have three of us at a time. When you've got the rubric together and worked out in some of the details, and I think many of us might be at least I will be sending you some questions and asking some definitions. But when something's further along, bring us in, because this isn't the best place necessarily to look at some of that stuff.
I can talk with our staff about looking into that.
Great, and I do want to just remind my colleagues to make sure that you're taking a look at the council procedures to make sure that we're not getting too in the weeds in terms of staff functions and responsibilities. So, keep in mind that, our role is legislative, not necessarily implementation. We got 3 minutes. Councilmember Small.
It would seem to me that if the goal of this process is to both streamline a onerous and difficult process for majority of residents and put more general professional opinion and data into the process, that the way that this is currently constructed doesn't inherently do that. And I would argue that as a general premise, if you're creating a rule-based structure that is too accountable to too many different kinds of systems or streams, then you end up in a situation where people take advantage of the path of least resistance that is related to their efficacies. And so even if there's not a petition and you can be the person who is singling out an area that is a quarter mile from someone else's house and you get 3 or 4 people doing it and then the data gets skewed, then that's all very interesting as well. It would seem to me that an acknowledgement of the fact that this is pre-existingly muddled would be necessary to move it forward in a manner that indicates both the alacrity of some of the pre-existing concerns and what I do not regard as an effective outpouring of support from either this council or previous councils as to developing something that is significantly important. And I will maintain my opinion until the cows come home.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilmember Small, and thank you so much, colleagues. So in terms of next steps, so I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm swimming in paper and I'm just trying to make sure I'm looking at the right one. But thank you all so much for all of your hard work on this. I know that you've heard that this has been an issue that council has asked for quite some time, and so I'm excited to see the fact that we're making some traction. I would like to ask my colleagues, I know that we've shared a lot of feedback and a lot of thoughts today. I would encourage my colleagues to send any comments that you all have in terms of the regulation language, as well as, aspects of the resolution, to Alex, copy Ira. That's me telling myself that we're done. If you could send those comments to Alex and copy Ira Keller and Mr. Eubanks, so that we'll have the ability to keep track of all of the feedback that folks have. I also want to encourage members of council to reach out to our team that's been working on this effort. I'm going to speak for them. They're more than happy to sit down with you to figure out any questions or concerns that you all may have. And so with that, I'm going to move us to the last agenda item for this evening, and that is a work session on committees. Yes, so I'm going to turn things over to our working group on
Sorry
committees.
to interrupt real quick.
Yeah, it just wasn't clear to me. Is the expectation that we would come back to council with revised regulation language before putting it in? Because one of the things that's oftentimes difficult, if council members are giving us comments, it's one council member that does not make a quorum that may not make it to the revisions. So it can be confusing on both sides, because we need to know that there's 4 members of council that want to see a particular thing in or not in, as the case may be. So I think what we're hearing is you'll give us comments back. We'll bring revised
The revisions
language
back.
with some further clarified rubric details. And our interest will be to do it quickly, because we're looking at this March newsletter publication timeframe. So that seems to,
Thank you so much, Director Braithwaite, for bringing that up. I don't know why in my brain I thought we were voting on this. So what I would suggest that we do, if everyone can bring your comments forward, and then we can make sure to have this item on the agenda. And I just want to check with the city clerk to make sure that we have space. It looks like we have a few things on the 24th that might be a little too quick of a turnaround, but we should have space on the 31st agenda.
You may want to check with the new city manager before you make that commitment.
Yeah, that's,
We also have some things that aren't on there.
It's my
there's
agenda.
no, you don't
I
have to do
control the
this this
agenda.
fast.
It's my agenda.
if we're looking at the 31st, could we have like a 1-week turnaround for council comments to us?
Yes.
Like
Is-
by this time next week?
Yep.
Speak now or forever?
Yep.
Hold
So
until the
just to
31st.
kind of recap for everyone, if we're going to give folks a 1-week turnaround for any comments that you have on what we discussed today. And then I will work to get this item added to the agenda for the 31st. And then staff can come back and present it to us, and that'll give you all enough time to make sure that we're able to get it into the March newsletter. Okay? Councilmember Gibson.
And so my suggestion to have those smaller meetings is, there's no interest in that.
You're free to meet with staff to discuss, but I will say, Councilmember Gibson, you know, I just want to reiterate that it's, the council's position is not to necessarily get into the weeds of implementing said tools. I think, you know, there was a usefulness for us kind of having that exchange when we were talking about the public space management plan. But at the end of the day, this would ultimately be a tool for staff to implement. I think the best thing, more important thing for us to do is to make sure that the language that we think is necessary for documenting our policies include enough detail that could kind of set the path forward for others to be able to follow the rules in our regs in terms of how to request these types of traffic calming measures and what to expect in the process in terms of approval. Okay. All right. So with that, we're going to move on to our last agenda item, and that is the recommendations for appointments to boards and committees. And I'll turn things over to Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the council committee that is making recommendations for appointments to the boards and committees. So we Councilmember DeBala, Fulcher, and Honzak, we met to review the set of applications that came in. We got 11 applications this round, and we had about 4 from Ward 2, 4 from Ward 1, 1 non-resident, 1 from Ward 6, and about 7 males and 4 females. We have decided that we'd like to recommend that we appoint 8 of those that have applied. And I want to pass it over to Councilmember Fulcher to share a little bit more about the criteria that we're using.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the criteria which are available, where did we say that we found them? Do you remember? You know, if a resident is interested in seeing the criteria.
We will add them to the website, but they're on the cover.
Okay, great. Yep, I've got the cover memo. So I'm just gonna, read them out for anybody who's interested. So the criteria include residency and other individual committee requirements. We do allow some residents on some committees, but there's a certain percentage that must be from Tacoma Park. An expression of interest. And the expression of interest, we're hoping to see something about that specific committee. That's why you would like to join it. Technical expertise or lived experience, organization and community affiliation, diversity and inclusion. We look at age, race, ethnicity, gender, and ward diversity in order to make sure we have a diverse group of people getting together. And then we look for contributions to the group, skills, lived experience, teamwork, and/or perspective at prospective members for our committees. So I'm turning it back over to Councilmember Honzak.
Okay, and just procedurally, can the clerk maybe clarify, is it normally done where we would read out the names or not at this point?
If you have made, tonight you're making recommendations to the city council.
Yes.
So it's better to read the names tonight.
Okay.
So the full council is aware.
Okay.
And the public, and then we'll have the resolutions for you to vote on next week.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and read out the names and then and the associated committees that we are recommending. First is Arts and Humanities Committee, Catherine Good. And she's a non-resident, but she does live on the other side of Flower Avenue. Arts and Humanities Committee, Theodore Carter from Ward 2. We also have for the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, Tom Gagliardio from Ward 1. For the Ethics Commission, we have Michael Miller from Ward 1. For the Recreation and Community Engagement, we have Ken Simler, also from Ward 1. From the Sustainable Maryland Committee, we have Melissa Klein. It's in Ward 2. For the Arts and Humanities Committee, we also have Ricky Anderson, Ward 6. And then also for the Board of Elections, we have Charles Nolan. And I believe that is all we have right now. And I think the procedure next is just that that's the end of that portion of the work session. I'm going to hand it over to Councilmember DiBala to discuss a few further issues about that have been discussed by this committee in relation to committee issues moving forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak and Fulcher. So we also, based on a question from the mayor, talked a little bit about the city council committee liaisons. So quite some time ago, the city council decided that we wanted to pilot the idea of having individual council members be liaisons with committees, not with commissions or boards, because they're making independent decisions. That's the whole point, is they're independent of us. But the question comes, well, what does a liaison look like, and what does it not look like? Given that there are staff people who staff each committee and handle a lot of the more routine things. So I also want to point out that when there was a survey a couple of years ago of then committee members, that this was something that the committee members said they wanted, was closer relation to closer personal connection with the council. The downside of having liaisons that council member Siemens mentioned at the time is if you're sitting at every meeting, you're not a committee member. You do have the authority of being a council member, which could be misunderstood by committee members. So one thing we don't want to do is have people attend every meeting, participate in the meeting, act like a committee member. That's not the job here. The point is to serve as a conduit along with the city staff person for information to and from the committees, to be available to the committee chair for information and questions on city council procedures, city council existing policies, because it can look kind of murky when you're thinking about a particular issue in a committee, you might not have any idea how to work it through the city council. Or if you even need to do that. To attend occasional meetings so that the members can meet you and feel more comfortable with you. But again, liaisons are not participating members of the committees. Just wanted to say that and see if there was any questions, comments, discussion on what the role would be. You good?
Yeah, I'll just.
Go ahead, Councilmember
And
Gibson.
then we can get to doing
Yeah,
it.
I guess serving as a conduit, bringing information back and forth, is this liaison recommended, and I have an opinion on questions that come up at a given meeting?
Maybe I could give an example. So if I was the liaison to the Recreation Committee, and they wanted to do an event, and they said, Cindy, what do you think? Well, I would probably not want to answer the question because it's what they want to think. I would want to say, if you do the event, you might need this permit, or you might need to start 2 months ahead, or you might need to put it in the newspaper or whatever. But yeah, I think the idea would be that I wouldn't want to have an opinion. Maybe I'm not understanding.
I can give a direct example. So I went to the grants committee and listened in on their meeting, and they would like to continue to have funding. And so they asked me how I thought was the best way to talk to the council members. I didn't weigh in on whether or not I think that they should get more funding or how much funding I thought they should get. What I did was, gave them my advice as a council member, how they should interact with us, what I thought might be the best way to get a hold of us. Because a lot of people on the committees, we don't see them come into council meetings. This is their major interaction with the city. And so it's helpful for them to have just another touch point with the city, which is having one of our lovely faces show up at their meeting.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. That's an awesome example. And I think to your point, in terms of how you broke it down, the example was very cognizant of not trying to speak on behalf of council. So we can't commit during these interactions because that requires the entire council to vote on something. But if there are ways where we could provide just a little bit of, hey, this is how the council works, here's how the budget process works, those kinds of, that informational exchange is fair game for our engagement with the committees. And I think that's a fine line that we just all need to make sure that we understand when we are engaging with the committees. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to thank the Subcommittee on Committees for considering my concerns about this, and I appreciate your understanding and the direction that this seems to be headed as far as how council members could be liaison to committees, but not be an influencing partner with the committee itself. So I would support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. All right. Councilmember Honzak.
So is it fair to understand that from this point forward, we are going to either vote on this, or are we just saying that we're going to do this, Mayor, with the liaison? How do we move forward on that?
So it's my understanding that we already voted as part of the kind of, I guess, the committees on committees kind of work that we've done, that the council will have liaisons. I think now it's a point of implementation for us where members of council will need to identify their committees that they will be working on. There's a list that has been floating around so everyone kind of knows which committees they're a part of, and then everyone can start to move forward with participating in your respective committees.
Can you send the list out?
Yes. I think I still have that list.
Do I need to say it louder so it's on
Yes, go ahead.
Or you go ahead.
Yep, so I have the list of the assigned committees for each council member, so I could just send that around again to just make sure that everybody has it.
Thank you.
No worries. Councilmember Gibson?
Just a question. So as, question is, is there any role or any manner that a council member can interact with the any committee that's not, they're not liaisoning with? Is that a taboo? Is that permitted? If I wanted to listen in on the recreation, just because I want to learn what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can listen in, and I guess if somebody asks me something, but basically not intervening, but rather learning.
Yeah, I see the city clerk shaking her head. Yes, the short answer is yes, you could do that. And I remember when I was early on council, I sat in on a couple of rec committee meetings just because
Yeah.
I wanted to get an understanding of
Yeah.
what was going on. So that's you can do that.
Okay, good.
Also, some of the committees have asked to come before the city council, and I think at least one of them isn't the Committee on Environment on the list for soon?
Yes, the Sustainable Maryland Committee
Sustainable
is
Maryland-
scheduled to
yeah.
come to council.
Yeah, okay, so in theory, they can all be coming to do that.
Yes.
It just hasn't happened
Hasn't
quite
happened
as
in a while.
regularly as
Yes.
would be nice.
Okay.
Then you would know, because they would be here.
Councilmember Gibson?
Just one other thing, because I'm, probably not done the kosher thing. So I have a constituent that's on a committee. I talk with him. I talk about how it goes.
Yeah.
And, oh, well, that sounds good. Or, have you thought about X? So is there any admonitions about interaction with committees or committee members? Other than, I can't represent, the council?
The full council, yeah.
I have opinions, whatever.
You're a resident.
I'm a resident.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to be clarified, because I don't know.
You'll be fine. You won't get your hand slapped. Councilmember Fulcher?
Just as a reminder, as someone who's been on one of the committees, that it does kind of change the dynamic when you, as a city council person, show up at the meeting. So if you're able to politely bow out after like 15 minutes so that they can continue to be normal and not put on airs because there's a prestigious city council member there, that can be helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. All right. Well, we're only about 10 minutes late, so we've done pretty good. And I'm not seeing any more lights, so I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Gibson seconds. All right. Everybody have a great night.